Hello everyone, this is Tactical Lich here, and today we are having another Wild Army build video featuring the Lizard Moses Tenhenhauin on top of his Engine of the Gods mount. Yes, we are bringing the Orbital Bombardment Laser today, guys. Credit to the suggestion of viewer Kurokuma is the best. I have been fielding only Tenhenhauin on his Engine of the Gods as the Lord option throughout the whole stream last week. And during some off-stream testing, my personal opinion is that Engine of the Gods, the Orbital Laser Beam, is extremely awesome to play with. However, it's not the most competitive choice on the Lizardmen roster. So if you do want to bring him, personally I think the best option you can take is just Tenhenhauin on his mount. Of course, you can also bring a Skink Priest on top of the engine or just the engine itself. However, they are not that cost effective, and I'll cover the reasons behind with more depth after the battle ends. And for now, let's go into the army build and see how the laser beam perform in combat. Now for the Lizardmen army played by yours truly, we have a couple of Skink Chiefs in the skies. These blow dart heroes doesn't have the most AP, but they do have plenty of ammo, allowing them to accumulate a lot of damage if given enough time. So given the lack of Norskin healing, their slow but steady damage output would be very effective. As for the front line, we have a bunch of Skink cohorts, Saurus warriors, and also Skink cohorts with Javis. At the back, we have some Saurus spears, also more Saurus protecting Tenhenhauin. At the back, some Cold One spear riders. We also have a single Bastillodon with solar engine, more laser beams on the battlefield, and in the front, a couple chameleon skinks. As for the Norskin player, we have a pretty wide army build here with a bunch of Marauder Spears Marauders, more Marauders on the other side backed by some Marauder Hunters with Javelins going for some Dino hunting. At the back, the most of Savagery, Armored Skin Wolves with Anti-Large, Physical Resistance, and Frenzy. They will be responsible for hunting down Lizardmen Dinos. We also have the War Mammoth with a War Shrine on its back. I think it doesn't add too much to the battlefield other than some minor supporting abilities. It does have the Giver of Glory, so the 24 melee attack would be pretty useful if they need some burst damage. As for Norskin leadership, we also have the Famir Balefiend with Lord of Shadows, as well as Wolfric the Wanderer bring in his teleporting ship and most of his attack buffs. He's a great duelist, but here he might be struggling a bit with the lack of armor piercing on his horse. We also have the Miststalkers Regiment of Renowned Famir Warriors. They have great armor piercing, armor sundering, magic damage, as well as stock, so I can't really see them as a player in the battle. And that's basically it for the army builds. Let's get the battle started and witness the chaos that ensues. The battle begins with the Skink Chiefs pushing forward, and Norskin not known for their air forces, giving the Skink Chiefs pretty much free reign on the battlefield today. Although they do have to be careful with the Marauder Hunters with Javelins, these Javelin missile infantry does have massive missile strength, especially with that anti-large, will do quite some noticeable damage on the Skink Chiefs, who are a rather glass cannon unit with their puny 30 armor. So they will be maybe pulling back away from the javelins, while the blow darts will be shooting into Wolfric, who is trying to hide behind these structures, but it seems that they are not doing him any good here. On the other side, we have the chameleon skinks pushing forward, getting some poke damage onto the marauders. Shooting the marauder spears is fine, but against the regular marauders, the shield will absorb some damage. But I was lazy and left them on fire at will. Still, damage is damage. While all the way on the other side, the Bastillodon with solar engine is shooting into the War Mammoth. Yes, the laser beam is a great anti-infantry tool, but it does have great missile strength and it's fairly accurate, so it is not a rare scenario to see people using the laser beam, the solar beam, to shoot at single entities. While at the rear of the Norskin army, the most of Savagery are getting focused fire by a bunch of Skink Chiefs who are retreating away from the Javelin fire, as well as the solar engine. As proven by the scorch mark on the ground there, now already one model down from the whole unit, a big loss in the early game. In the front line, the War Mammoth is pushing forward, tanking a bunch of the Skink cohort javelins, and now using its superior mass to crush into the back lines, shutting down the Skink cohorts with javelins, while on the other side, the Saurus has a bit more success in pushing off the Marauder spears. On the blob, the Norskin going all in with the spells, the bolt and the pendulum, blasting away my Skink cohorts who still have a lot of javelins left. Such a waste of resources. The Saurus took some damage from the spells, but they are now protected by the impenetrable pelt, providing a little bit of a physical resistance, helping them to tank out some damage from the War Mammoth. While the Cold One Spear Riders flooding in and trying to pin down the War Mammoth. buying time for Tenhenhauin's Stegodon as well as the Lizard missiles to focus down the massive monster. And here comes the first glorious orbital laser, dropping down from the heavens, beaming slowly across the battlefield, golden light scorching the earth, leaving down a path of pure carnage and destruction. All these marauders are absolutely ruined in combat, leaving some breathing room for the Saurus warriors. Still, these valiant fighters have taken massive damage from the combination of monsters and marauders, as well as the heroes of the Norscan player. They will soon be buckling, while on this other flank, finally the Norscan forces have whipped around the crater in the middle of the map and now joining forces with the rest of the army. But it seems that they're a bit late as the War Mammoth is routed, another pendulum gone down the line, but on some very cheap skink cords, not sure if that's the best use of magic. While the most of savagery taking some massive damage with the combination of Bastiladon and blow darts from the chameleon skinks will be routed for now, but they are still regenerating, still have 11 models left. They will surely come back. And on the left flank we have a massive melee grind, with Tenhenhauin leading a massive force of Saurus warriors fighting a bunch of marauders backed up by the Mist Stalkers, the elite familiars. Tenhenhauin has popped the stand your ground, giving the melee defense buff to the units around him to stem the Norscan tide a little longer. While the Cold and Spear Riders will be rushing forward trying to shut down all these javelins, who are a great threat to my monsters, especially Tenhenhauin. While at the back we have the Bastiladon still online firing all that solar laser beams at the War Mammoth, debuffing him with that blinding effect. Wulfric the Wanderer taking some steady and massive damage accumulated from the Skink Chiefs. Not only that, being stuck in melee combat so close to other missile units like the Chameleon Skinks and the Javis makes him a prime target for all those poison missiles to focus on. However, now Wulfric is charging into this fight with the support of some Marauders and the Mist Stalkers. They should be able to get an upper hand in the fight with the armor sundering of the Mist Stalkers debuffing the armor of the Stegodon, giving Wulfric a bit of a damage boost, especially with Hunters of Champions popped up, lowering his melee stats down to 0 melee defense. He's not blocking any attacks whatsoever, and Tenhenhauin will be going down, a massive monster hunted down by the Hunter of Champions. Before Tenhenhauin goes down, a one last defiant laser beam is shot into the skies. Yes, the Norscan player dodged with the Marauders, but here the Javelins actually get singed. Not a lot of kills, but massive HP damage. Now let's have a look around the battlefield. The Lizardmen forces are running kind of thin, with a bunch of skink units scattered around the battlefield. Some Javi skinks came back from routing. Over here, Chameleon skinks ran out of ammo, will have to be dumped into melee combat soon. Wulfric in the trees is just chilling here, using the tree cover to protect himself from the assassination of the skink chiefs, who are now actually focusing down the monsters here. The Mist Stalkers, a massive threat to my remaining army because they are a great unit with 43 attack, 52 defense. Combined with the heavy armor, they can kill off most of my remaining units. Armor sundering on these guys will lower the armor on the Saurus warriors and monsters, doing some great damage against these armored units, as well as giving the non-armor piercing marauders a bit of a damage boost against my army. Finally returning from routing, these battered skink cohorts who ran out of Javis will be charging into the marauders, while the rest of the Chameleon skinks will be expanding their ammo, trying to soften up their opponents. And at the back we have a shattered War Mammoth running away. Where is Wulfric? I'm not sure. Okay, here Wulfric is running away after being shot way too many times by the Skink Chiefs in the skies. And now even the javelins of the Norscan player has ran out of ammo. And then as expected, the most of savagery came back, healing up all the way to around 25% health, running down routing units while the Lizardmen forces are stuck in melee combat. Bastiladon with Solar Engine ran out of ammo, now engaging in melee combat. Thankfully, the Fear and Terror helps out quite a bit against the Marauders, Terror routing them, helping my frontline holds. The Saurus warriors, who are extremely tattered, is also returning into the fray. Chameleon skinks, more of them are rushing into combat using their poison to debuff this blob. While the Familiar Balefiend has been taking a bunch of blow darts now that Wulfric is gone, and the Skink Chief will be focusing him down. And after taking massive damage, the Balefiend will be routed. Now, there's still some Marauder hunters at the back who managed to rout off my cont'd riders. I'm not sure where they went, pretty much off the battlefield, I'm sure. They are decent melee combatants, so I'm not surprised they can hold off a depleted cont'd rider. And now, these Javelin Marauders are unleashing their missiles, trying to use up all their remaining ammo, capitalizing on that massive missile strength. Actually, let's check how much damage they actually do. 18 per shot, 7 armor piercing, and also 15 bonus versus large, a massive threat to my remaining monsters. With Tenhenhauin dead, the Bastiladon is the only good target for them to shoot at, as it is my only bastion of melee strength on the battlefield, while the Skink Chief can easily dodge their missiles, making them waste all their remaining ammo. While over here, the Maws of Savagery chased off some routing Lizardmen units, will be returning to combat, but will they make it back in time, as the balance of power is in favor of the Lizardmen. Now we have some skink cohorts with Javies rushing forward as well. They are trying to tie down the Javelin Marauders in combat so that the rest of the Lizardmen army can catch up and kill off these missile infantry, eliminating this threat to the Lizardmen Dinos. And also, the Skink Chief has been firing at the Miststalkers for the whole time. Yes, the Miststalkers have 110 armor, and they managed to resist most of the damage from the Skink Chiefs. However, these blow dart damage really adds up throughout the consistent firing. It's not a lot of burst damage, but enough to shatter these regiment of renowned Familiar Warriors. With the Familiar Warriors gone, the only powerhouse unit left for the Norskin is the Maws of Savagery, who is slowly healing up, and also some returning Marauders, and the remaining routing forces of the Norskin will be pushed away by the Chameleon Skinks and whatnot. However, at this point of battle, I totally forgot about the Maws of Savagery. They were on the edge of the map, so was out of my sight. And as the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. Thinking that the Maws of Savagery already gone from battlefield, I thought that the Saurus Warriors will be able to easily handle these Marauders, and was caught totally off guard as the Skin Wolves tear into the Saurus Warriors, not only routing them but also shattering them, stripping away my already depleted infantry support. So to stop these Skin Wolves from making a comeback, the burden now goes to the Skink Chief as they slowly chip away the health of the Skin Wolves with their blow darts, while my remaining army slowly pushes forward to position for a final showdown. The Skin Wolves, under the missile attacks and debuffed by poison, realizing that they cannot break the Bastiladon in a short time, quickly switches their target to some battered Saurus Warriors, trying to cause a quick rout with the Fear attribute, but the Saurus Warriors received a clutch cold-blooded. That leadership buff helped the Saurus Warriors to barely cling on to their leadership, hold down the Skin Wolves, allowing the Bastiladon to catch up and deliver a devastating rear charge, securing the victory for the Lizardmen. Now, before we talk about the Engine of the Gods, let's have a quick look at the army performances. For the Lizardmen army here, the Saurus Warriors and Spears, they did an okay job at beating back the Marauders, but the lack of armor piercing prevented them from doing too much damage to the Norskin monsters. As for the Skink cohorts, one of the unit got destroyed by the combination of War Mammoth and also the area of effect spells of the Norska. So not a lot of damage, but the other one 800 value. Remember, they only cost 400 gold. So double their own value and also 1 chevron, as their javelins was able to do some massive damage to both the War Mammoth and Wolfric the Wanderer himself. Chameleon Skinks, always a great cost-effective unit. Their skirmishing capabilities are just great at chipping away health at whatever units that an opponent might bring. They also have decent AP, so even against something like an armored Skin Wolves, they still manage to do some decent damage. We also have the Cold One Spear Riders here. They were not able to do too much damage as they were forced to fight some devastating charges of War Mammoth there. The heavy AP caused quite a bit of damage on them, and also being forced to chase down the Javelin Marauders exposed them to those anti-launch javelins fire, fighting on a decent melee combatant and whatnot, basically dragged them down in combat, unable to do too much here. Bastiladon with Solar Engine, always a solid unit with 1200 gold, 1 chevron, was able to chip away quite a bit of health on these War Mammoth and other key units of the Norska, and in the end, using that fear and terror charging into the flanks of these Maws of Savagery, securing the victory for the Lizardmen. Skink cohort, they are Skink cohort, so can't really say much about them. They can't even beat back the normal Marauders. The Skink Chiefs, always a cost-effective skirmishing option, getting way over 1000 gold on both units there, did some considerable damage on the key units of Norska, including Wolfric, the Familiar Balefin, the Maws of Savagery, and the Miststalkers. And as for our Engine of the Gods, the unit Spotlight Tenhenhauin, this guy is more like a tank to soak up all the damage and wasn't able to do too much damage in return. Tenhenhauin's main role in battle is to support his army with his abilities and also crush any weaker resistance as he charged into the marauders, routing them with fear and terror, and also using the armor piercing to dish out some damage against the war mammoth. The impenetrable pelt cast as well as the hold your ground allowed his army to hold against the Norscan rush a little longer, delaying their advance, buying time for the missile units to dish out the damage. He's not a dedicated duelist, so it's only reasonable for him to lose against Wolfric the Wanderer. Overall, I would say he fulfilled his role in combat decently. As for the Norscan player, the Marauders are Marauders. They are basically the chaff of the Norscan army, didn't do too much damage. The most of savagery, taking some heavy damage from a combination of Lizardmen missiles, didn't manage to get too much value, not a lot of good targets for them to fight honestly, especially given their lack of armor piercing. However, the Miststalkers did a lot better, 1,382 gold, they cost almost 1,400 if I remember correctly. That's an okay performance. Now, the Marauder Hunters with Javelins, massive damage. They were able to fire at a lot of cost-effective targets, Tenhenhauin, the Cold One Spear Riders, and also the Bastillodon. The massive anti-large missile strength is just brutal against a monster faction like the Dino Boys. War Mammoth with the War Shrine, only 846 gold worth of damage as he is focused down heavily by all these Javis, the Chameleon Skinks, and also the Bastillodon with Solar Engine. In the end, wasn't able to do too much here. The Familiar Balefiend didn't cast a lot of spells other than the Pendulum. It is not exactly the greatest spell against the Lizardmen. Instead, I'll probably say they would want to use a Plague of Rust from the Metal Lore to debuff the armor on these monsters, allowing the Javelins to do a lot more damage, or at least a final transmutation would be decent. So Lore of Metal would probably be a better choice against the Lizardmen. Now for Wolfric the Wanderer, he was able to snipe out a Tenhenhauin along with the support of some Marauders and Marauders with Javis. Did a lot of damage with the boat, but that's pretty much it. Only bringing his horse mount today, he does lack the AP to hunt down big dinos. And that's basically it for the post-battle screen. Now let's move on to the army selection screen to talk about the Engine of the Gods. Now let's have a closer look at the Engine of the Gods. As a unit, it basically have the same melee stats as the regular Ancient Stegodon. It does not have the missile power as it is replaced by the altar on its back, giving him instead the Burning Alignment, his most notable ability, the Orbital Laser. It basically functions like a wind spell, shooting into the sky, drops down again, moving in a straight line and burns everything down along the way, giving him massive AoE damage power at the cost of 120 seconds cooldown as well as 5-second winding time, also limited to 2 casts only. For the other buffs, we have the Portent of Warding, 5% damage resistance. It's not a lot, however it is constant, so I guess it does help out in combat by consistently reducing damage throughout a prolonged period of time. Lastly, we have the Arcane Configuration, providing improved power recharge rate for the Lizardmen. Now, the biggest problem of the Orbital Bombardment is that its winding time is way too long. With a total of 5 seconds before the laser beam can hit anything on the ground, it gives your opponents plenty of time to react and dodge away from the trajectory. So what people usually does is just to use Lord Mazdamundi, bring him with the Net of Emmentalk, pin down your opponents, and then drop the Orbital Laser on top of them, obliterating the now unmovable units. This is not exactly a cost-effective option because when you're bringing in Mazdamundi, you're also bringing yourself a lot of AoE power already. You have the Banishment and the Ruination of Cities, both of which are extremely strong as well at the cost of only a few more hundred gold. Now when you are bringing an Engine of the Gods, you are paying for an additional 2,050 gold just for the Orbital Laser and some redundant abilities. Yes, you're also paying for an additional Stegodon, but why buy an Ancient Stegodon when you can just bring Slack? Hence, the engine is not a reasonable investment. Lord Mazdamundi's toolkit basically renders every bit of the Engine of the Gods redundant. With the Shield of the Old Ones, a 20% damage resistance during a key moment is much better than a constant 5% damage reduction. And also we have the Greater Arcane Conduit, which is just better than the Arcane Configuration in every way, with great increase to power reserves and improved power recharge rate. It gives you more magic throughout the battle other than simply squeezing dry your magic reserves. And that's why bringing an Engine of the Gods alone is not a good option, as the long winding time for the burning alignment makes the laser beam very ineffective, and if you bring it with Mazdamundi, it doesn't add anything to the army despite paying so much gold. The second option to bring the Engine of the Gods is to slap a Skink Priest on top, providing your Engine of the Gods with a bunch of spellcasting power. However, the cost of this unit is still extremely high, as the mount itself is extremely expensive, costing 1950 gold. Not exactly much different from the unit itself, only 100 gold difference, and on top of that you're paying for the Skink Priest as well. In addition, the Portent of Warding as well as the Arcane configuration aren't that impactful of an ability. And now with bringing the Skink Priest, you're paying a lot just for getting the burning alignment, and a rather mediocre monster that can only bully weaker units and cannot duel any monsters from the same weight class. And on top of that, usually the most competitive lords for Lizardmen are the Slann as well as Krogar, all of which are extremely expensive if you actually bring them with their full power, especially Krogar with his Carnosaur mount. So again, you're back to that huge resource sink for little in return, as the Skink Priest with that Engine of the Gods mount doesn't really carry its own weight. An Oxyato might work with the Engine of the Gods, but still, you're sinking a lot of resources and limiting your monster choices, as you can actually buy 2 solar engines with less money than a single Skink Priest on the Engine of the Gods. And that leaves us only one remaining option for Engine of the Gods, Tenhenhauin's mount. And just by looking at the cost of these mounts, you can see that Stegadons with the Engine of the Gods is much more cost effective on Tenhenhauin, as you're only paying 1200 gold more for the mount. And on top of that, you have a stat increase. Now, it seems that at the first glance, Tenhenhauin's Engine of the Gods mount does not seem to be an improvement, as it does have lower attack, but consider that Tenhenhauin does have Frenzy as an ability, providing more armor-piercing weapon damage, charge bonus, and more importantly, melee attack, making Tenhenhauin a much better melee combatant as long as he can keep his leadership high. And on top of that, Tenhenhauin has a bunch of abilities that can make himself more survivable in melee, including Stand Your Ground to provide that melee defense buff, as well as leadership increase, and more importantly, the Plague of Sotak. This ward save ability that also adds additional leadership can be activated every time he casts a spell, which means Flock of Doom, Manticore Summon, Curse of Onra Air, and the most important of them all, the Pen's Impenetrable Pelt, stacking the 20% ward save from the Plague of Sotak. Now, Tenhenhauin has 45% damage resistance against physical attacks. That's almost half damage. Although not an area of effect protection like that of the Shield of the Old Ones, it does grant Tenhenhauin a massive reduction in damage received and help him survive a lot longer than a normal Stegadon. And if you want him to survive even longer, bring a Rev Crystal or a Skink Oracle to heal him up, and you have an extremely tanky Stegadon that is actually good in combat and is not Mazdamundi on Slack. And on top of that, this Stegadon can actually summon a Manticore to gang up on some poor single entities and aid himself in combat, providing a different kind of utility than the Slann Mage. With these factors in mind, you can say that you're paying the extra money for the Engine of the Gods not for the orbital bombardment, but for a powerful mount that can synergize pretty well with Tenhenhauin's abilities. It is a rather self-contained package of brutal melee power, army supporting spells, as well as area of effect orbital bombardment to clear out blobbed up enemies. All that only costing you 1200 gold extra instead of the 2000 gold for the Skink Priest mount or the generic Engine of the Gods unit. Of course, Engine of the Gods is still not the most competitive unit on the Lizardmen roster, but I would say it is still a unit worth bringing just for the rule of cool. It is an enjoyment to look at the orbital laser slowly panning across the battlefield, leaving behind a trail of destruction and carnage. However, bring the Engine of the Gods alone or put a Skink Priest on top of it is pretty much a liability to your army. That's why you should only bring the Engine of the Gods as a mount of Tenhenhauin, using this legendary Skink's abilities and items to turn the Engine of the Gods into an actual killing machine. While the orbital laser, in this case, will act more as an eye candy, some additional fireworks you can bring to the table. It is great if the laser actually kills a bunch of enemies, but even if it doesn't, it is not that much of a loss because You are relying on Tenhenhauin's melee prowess as well as his supporting abilities to generate the value instead of orbital laser. And that's basically it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk about Genocidal Lizard Moses and his orbital laser. What are your thoughts on the Engine of the Gods? What do you think is the best way to make this unit viable? Feel free to share us your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you enjoy my content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe to get notified every time I upload a new video. They'll be ranging from more army build videos like this one, battle replays for Total Warhammer 2 online multiplayer, as well as tips and strategies for the game. And that's gonna be all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.